Hi guys, welcome back. We're now starting with a new topic, and that is economic systems. And this topic is going to tell us that how technically is the economy, being run. What role do these systems play in an economy and resource allocation? This topic 2.9, it talks about market economic system. You have two more economic systems, that is planned and mixed economic system. Although planned economic system has been removed from your syllabus, but still we're going to be discussing a few points from it on a basic level, because only then you will properly be understanding mixed economic system. Apart from that, 2.9, that is your market economic system, is actually connected with 2.2, that is the role of markets in allocating resources. Both these topics are interconnected, so we're going to be looking at them now. Coming back. Now, guys, coming back, we're starting with economic systems here, and as you can see on your screens, you can see that you have a different writing over here, and this different writing is because sometimes my TAs, assistants, they sort of make these pointers to make life easy for me under my supervision, so you don't need to worry about that. It's all under my supervision, and this is equally good. And they sometimes make these pointers to so that I can focus on some other stuff. Okay, guys, so coming back, what economic systems are. This video is going to be an introduction video on what economic systems are and what roles do these play, right? So, first we need to understand what an economic system is. I mean, system, we know what a system is. System is like a process, procedures, rules, and mechanisms. That's what a system is. So, an economic system would mean the rules, procedures, mechanisms that govern an economy through which through which markets and the economies actually run, and a lot of key decisions are taking place based on what sort of economic systems we are operating in, right? So so what do we I mean, what do we actually mean by an economic system? In very simple terms, economic system is the way, it's the way a society decides how to use its limited resources. And if you remember, we discussed this in a first few lessons about resources being scarce but human wants are unlimited. And because of this problem, every society must answer three basic economic questions, three fundamental economic questions. Every economy has to answer, no matter how rich or poor the economy is. We have to decide, what to produce. Should we produce more foods, more clothes, more smartphones, or more hospitals? I mean, should the economy focus its resources on on more food, more clothes, more smartphones, or more hospitals? Or, it also needs to decide on how to produce. Do we use more machines or labor, or do we use advanced technology, or just simple methods to produce these goods? And the third thing we need to decide is for whom these goods are going to be made. Who actually gets the goods and services that are produced? Do the rich get it? Do the poor get it? Or everyone equally gets it? And so essentially, guys, an economic system is about how these three decisions are made. An economic system is about how these three decisions are made. Got it? This is what the purpose of an economic system is. Because you see, you have three different economic systems: a market economic system, a planned economic system, and a mixed economic system. And all these three economic systems would answer these three questions differently, because all these three economic systems have different ways in which or different objectives that they're actually trying to achieve, right? So different economic systems would answer these questions in different ways. And that I mean on and why would they answer these questions in different ways? Or what I mean you know like I said, that they would answer these questions different ways, and that would depend on a few things, right? That would depend upon, like, I mean, whether these goods are for everyone, like for whom to produce, right? Who are we making them for? So obviously, a market economy, you learn that is going to be making the goods for those people who can actually afford it, that is the rich. While a planned economic system where everything is centrally planned, where the government is actually The central planners of the economy, the government, which is referred to, the central planners are deciding what, how, for whom to produce. They would be focusing on a more equitable way of distributing goods or producing goods for everyone, basically equally, right? So, I mean, you know, like I said, different economic systems answer these questions in different ways, and that actually fundamentally depends upon a few things. That is, it depends on who owns those resources. Like, are the resources owned privately by individuals, or are all these resources and factors of production owned by the government, right? Or who makes the decisions? Like, is it the consumers or and the firms that are making decisions in an economic system, or is it the government making the decisions, right? I mean, what we're essentially trying to say is that an economic system, what decisions are made, or how, for whom, for what to be produced, are decided differently in different economic systems. And that essentially depends upon, or what sort of an economic system you will have, or you have, depends upon who owns these resources. Are these resources or factors of production owned privately by individuals or by the government? Or who owns these labor land businesses? I mean, does the government owns them, or are they owned privately by individuals and households and firms? Who makes key decisions? Like, is it the consumers and the firms who collectively make these key decisions, or is it the central planners or the government who makes key decisions in an economy? Again, how is income distributed? Do people earn money based on market forces? Like, I mean, people whose demand is high. Let's say if the demand for doctors is very high, so they would end up getting more salaries and wages. But if the demand for engineers is very high, or chartered accountants is very high, or economists is very high, they would earn more. So who I mean, how is income actually distributed in the economy? How do people earn money? uh, are do people sort of earn based on market forces of demand and supply of labor, or does the government decides a minimum sort of a government decides that who earns how much, right? So is it the government who's going to decide that wages won't increase beyond this level, or the government decides who earns how much, or the wages are decided, or salaries are decided, or incomes are decided based on the demand and supply of labor? And income distribution also has to do with who these goods are produced for. Are they produced for the rich, or are they produced for the poor, or is it going to be they're going to be produced equally for everyone, right? Again, how are prices determined? Like, we already studied in demand supply that prices are determined by the market forces of demand supply. But that means that prices are decided in a market, and market is a place of buyers and sellers. So we're talking about private markets there. But if things are centrally planned, that if the economic system is run by the government or the central planners, then you don't really have markets deciding prices, or prices won't be decided by demand and supply mechanisms. Prices will be decided by the central planners of the government, and irrespective of whether you have a shortage or a surplus, or you have high or low demand or high or low supply, the government would keep those prices fixed irrespective of any subsequent changes. So the market doesn't really fundamentally operates the way it does in through demand supply, especially if key economic decisions are made by the central planners or the government. And that is exactly why it necessitates us as students to study about economic systems, because based on economic systems, key decisions are made, and that is why it is important and mandatory for us to first understand that what economic systems are, and so that we can understand how key decisions are made in an economy, right? So again, how are prices determined? Are they determined through demand supply, or whether prices are determined by the government control, right? So you guys can think of economic systems as a set of rules and mechanisms that decide how these choices will be made in an economy. And you can write this down as I speak, that economic systems, you can consider them as a set of rules or mechanisms that would decide how choices are made in an economy. And that leads us to this definition that is also written in your textbook, which I have extracted here, that economic systems is referring to all those institutions, organizations, and mechanisms and rules and procedures that would influence how an economy works, and that would determine how resources are allocated, or how key decisions are made, or how choices are made by households and firms, and how choices to are made about what, how, for whom to produce, right? And because because if things, I mean, because the government makes decisions in a different way as compared to how consumers and private sector firms make decisions, economists, and since there are differences in how the government would end up allocating resources versus how do markets end up allocating resources, or how do markets function, and the brains of the market. When we talk about the brains of the market, we're talking about consumers and producers in a private sector market, where key resource allocation decisions are made by consumers and firms. And their brains work differently as the brains of the government, right? And because we have these differences on how the government thinks versus how consumers and firms think, especially private sector firms and households, we're talking about, because they have different objectives entirely. Economists usually divide economic systems into three main types, like market economy, number one, number two, the planned or the command economy, and the mixed economy. And this video, by the way, the one you're watching right now, is just setting the precedents and the foundation. And later on, from the next video, we're going to be looking at each economic system in detail properly. So, I'm going to be introducing the market economy, a brief idea about what the market economy is in the picture. So, guys, see, economy means simply a system, the economic system we're talking about. Market means buyers and sellers. We're talking about consumers, households, and firms. So, we're talking about demand supply basically, right? We're talking about households and firms and how they make decisions. I mean, they make decisions based on demand supply mechanisms. So, simply about a market economy is simply the core idea of a market economy is that economic decisions are made through the interaction of buyers and sellers in a market. And a market economy is where a market economy, see, a market is where buyers and sellers interact through demand supply. They buy and sell goods, and prices are decided collectively in the market. And if subsequently demand and supply changes and prices adjust and quantity traded adjust accordingly, and that's how decisions are made in an economy where thousands and millions and billions of consumers and firms participate in key economic decision making. And ideally, the system heavily relies on the price mechanism, and we're going to be diving deep into what the price mechanism is in the coming videos. Where prices, actually, the mechanism through which prices decides key resource allocation, on how to allocate scarce resources, right? And economic decisions, when we say that, when we're talking about an economic system, it's saying that economic decisions are made through the interaction of buyers and sellers, which actually, and what we're trying to say is that which actually means that when we're saying that economic system is a market economic system, or a market economy, also known as a market economic system, is where the economic decisions in the entire economy is governed through markets. It's governed through markets, and based on the brains of the markets and how markets function. How markets function through interactions with demand, supply, buyers, and sellers. So what we're saying is that if that's the brains of the markets, and if that's how markets function, then if your entire economic system is a market based economic system, then you just need to sort of apply the same market principles on the entire economy and project it through to the entire economy, that the markets govern every aspect of different sectors in the economy, be it markets in the primary, tertiary, or the secondary sector. So economic decisions are made through the interaction of buyers and sellers, and what that means is that consumers decide what they want to buy. It's like people like me and you who will decide what that we want to buy this, or we prefer that, and producers would respond accordingly. So firms would decide what they want to produce based on what consumers want to buy, and prices would act as signals, right? I will write this down as I speak, that prices act as signals that guide these decisions. Guide what decisions? Number one, they guide decisions as in how much to buy, should we buy more or less. So, or for firms as well, that what should they produce. Okay, fine, firms would decide that we should end up producing what consumers want, but then how much should we produce? More or less depends upon what prices are being offered in the market. Consumers deciding, okay, fine, we want this, but how much should we want this? Should we want more of this or less of this? Depends upon what the prices are. So prices act as signals to both consumers and firms that guide these decisions, right? So the role of prices, guys, the price mechanism is simply referring to the role of prices in a market economy, or the role of prices in markets. And when your market economy is simply an economy where all key decisions that are taking place in different sectors and industries has the brains of a market, where decisions are based on demand, supply, and buyers and sellers making those decisions, not the central planners, not the government. The government is not going to decide how much steel is to be made, or how much airplanes need to come every day to operate between Karachi to Lahore, or from Pakistan to Dubai, or Dubai to Pakistan, or how many chocolates need to be made, or how many cars need to be made, or should more EVs be electric vehicles be sold, or should more petrol vehicles be sold. I mean, these decisions would be taken by the industries and the markets in which those industries operate, right? Between these interactions, millions and billions of interactions that take place between consumers and firms on a daily basis. And the price mechanism guides these decisions, right? And you'll learn in the future videos that the price mechanism is an efficient way of allocating resources, but not in this video when you'll be studying about the advantages of a market economic system. So remember, guys, that when prices fluctuate, when prices go up and down, resources automatically move, right? When prices change, when prices, write this down as I speak, that when prices change, when the prices go up or down, resources follow suit. That is, that resources automatically move, which means that if, let's say, the demand of a product increases, then we know that prices would rise. If demand is increasing, prices rise in the market. We already studied that in demand and supply. And if prices will rise, then firms are attracted to produce more of it, and quantity supply extends. So this is again resource allocation. The fact that quantity supply is extending and firms are producing more means that the existing firms that were already producing that good would end up producing more, while some new firms would enter the market as well, because they would see that now higher prices are being offered for this particular product or good, and it's in our best interest to close all our declining, failing businesses or loss-making businesses, and we should enter this thriving, profitable market where higher prices are being offered for this product, and we should sell that instead. But on the other hand, if demand falls, the prices would fall, and falling prices would signal producers that the market is declining and it's a loss making market and we should exit from this market. So resources would move away from that product automatically. And this automatic allocation of resources, where resources move in the direction where price signals and incentivizes the allocation of resources, where it signals and incentivizes producers on in where should they allocate their resources, is what the price mechanism, or the beauty of the price mechanism is. That the central planners of the government doesn't really need to tell the producers that, should they produce more of this good or less of the other good. In fact, the prices play an automatic role on their own, without the need of the government or central planners to actually intervene and guide decisions to be made by producers or the consumers. So all this is happening. This is what the price mechanism is, and all of this is happening without anyone centrally planning about it, right? Another misconception that students usually have is that they think that, the government is totally absent in a market economy, or there's no government, but that's not true. Even if your economy is a market-based economy, or you have an economic system which is a market-based economic system. See, a market-based economic system means that the deciding hand, or the resource allocating hand, where should we allocate resources? Should we buy more of this, less of this? Should we produce more of this, less of this? Or what needs to be produced, how it needs to be produced, for whom it needs to be produced? This really lies in the hands of the consumers and the firms, right? It lies in the hands, the verdict, or the shots. Who calls the shots? The private sector calls the shots, right? The central planners do not call those shots. But are the central planners there? Yes, they are there. The government is there. But what role does the government has in a market economy? Does it has any role? Yes, they have, but that role is minimal, limited to, restricted to only these three things, which I will tell you right now. So don't think that the government doesn't really exist in a market economy. It does exist, but its role is limited. See, what are we studying? We're studying economic system. What sort of an economic system are we studying right now? We're studying an market-based economic system. Now, do we have any examples about market-based economic systems? See, market-based economic. So, I mean, you have to understand that most of the economies are like USA and Singapore, as you can say, is a market-based economic system with very limited role, or you can say with very limited government intervention. So you can so what we're saying is that uh, I mean, the government is there. So this is your economic system or the economy, and the government is there, and it has its own certain things going on, its own things going on the side, and its objective of this government is to ensure that this economic system, the market-based economic system, is running smoothly. But in a market-based economic system, the government is not going to just directly intervene in these markets and tell the firms and the producers and the consumers on what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Like, the government wouldn't really come up and just say that we're taxing this product, or we're imposing price controls, or let's say if the product is being sold at $10 a day, then the government says this is too expensive. I'm sorry, we're not gonna let this be sold at $10 a day. I mean, this product will be sold at $3 a day from tomorrow. I mean, the government is not gonna do that, because the government really doesn't want to do that. And you learn under the disadvantages of government intervention, that government intervention, when the government actively, aggressively intervenes in in markets, it can distort, write this down, distort efficiency. Because up till now, what we are learning is that these systems or the markets itself are efficient in allocating resources. It doesn't really need the government to come up and show up and tell us what to do and what not to do and how to do it. We'll figure that out on our own. And so when you say that, we're talking about, so the government has a role, but the role is limited. In a market-based economic system, there won't be any aggressive or active government intervention. The government wouldn't really come up imposing taxes or telling the firms that you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. Or let's say the government telling the producers that you're causing a lot of pollution in the environment, and hence, I mean, let's say the government wouldn't really come up and tell an oil company that it needs to extract less oil and produce less oil, or a fuel company to make less fuel because it's creating environmental damage. The government is not going to come do that in a market economic system, because the government wants to ensure efficiency. And later on in the videos, you learn that government taxing markets and firms would increase the cost of production, making these efficient. I mean reducing efficiency, basically. So the government is there, but the government is not going to actively intervene in the market. So the government is still present, but it would focus on, but its role is limited, and its role is limited to these things, and there is no aggressive or active government intervention in a market economic system. And the government could intervene in various ways. It could impose taxes, it could impose price controls, it could come up with different laws and regulations, that maybe the government comes up from tomorrow and it bans the production of, let's say, cigarettes and alcohol. Now, you could argue that why is that bad? I mean, the government should be doing that. Well, you're right, but then that also creates tax revenues. I mean, that also creates it basically creates GDP. These companies provide lots and lots of employment for businesses. They're also exporting. I mean, Cuba exports cigars throughout the world, and a lot of these goods, even although they're harmful, but are still exported. So technically, if I were to sum up things, because this is a very deep chapter, and market economic system sort of resembles a capitalistic society, that it sort of represents or reflects capitalism, where the whole idea of market economic system is to maximize wealth and profits and incomes for the nations and the producers, while giving less shit about what's going on in the environment, and not really bothered about how damaging that could be for the environment and the upcoming generations. But the whole idea is about money and efficiency, and how money, wealth, and incomes drives efficiency, and how it makes societies prosper. But that's a very limited lens, or a very limited way of looking at economic prosperity based on income and wealth generation, because social economists, or economists who have critiqued such a system, they have critiqued such a system, saying that the government's involvement in markets is necessary, otherwise this is going to cause market failure. And you learn this in the future videos about what market failure is, where markets fail to allocate resources efficiently. In fact, you learn that that creates harmful impacts on the environment, and big companies could exploit consumers and stuff like that. So that is why government intervention is important and necessary, and you learn that. But if you have a pure market economy, the government intervention wouldn't really be there, and if it is there, then it would be very, 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 very minimal. And majorly the role of the government would be just to protect property rights, enforcing contracts, and maintaining law and order. And overall, the government would have very much minimal influences over, or in fact no influence, in fact, in practical reality, no influence over prices and output. And the government or the central planners will not decide what should be made, how much should be made, or what prices should be charged. And those decisions are left to the market forces of demand and supply, right? So, how resources sort of move in a market economy, you have to understand that as prices change, and price changes are determined by the interaction of demand and supply. So, if demand goes up, price goes up; demand goes down, price goes down; supply goes up, price goes down; supply goes down, price goes up. You know that, right? So, as price changes, guys, those prices signal and incentivize producers and consumers. So resources, guys, move automatically towards those goods that are becoming popular. More of those goods will be produced that are becoming more popular. Now you see, we all witnessed, the world witnessed a very much growing culture, a growing culture about coffee. The coffee culture that we have right now. And that's why we're seeing that a lot of coffee shops are being opened up by entrepreneurs and businesses, and they're cashing on it. So resources move towards goods that are becoming more popular, while resources move away from goods that are becoming less popular because of falling demand. So what guys we learn is that the markets constantly adjust themselves. They self adjust based on the markets constantly adjust itself based on consumer preferences. They adjust itself based on changes in demand. They adjust itself based on changes in supply. If so, and that is why we say that a market economy is self-adjusting and self-healing. And what is that core medicine that is used to self-adjust and self-heal markets? Is the price mechanism. So imagine, let's say, that the supply goes up tremendously, and so that would result in a surplus, and a surplus isn't really good because it means unsold stock. So what will happen is that automatically prices would start going down to sell off that surplus, and when the price will go down, it is going to signal and incentivize consumers that, oh my god, prices are going down, we should buy more. So consumers would start buying more. But then when prices would go down, it would also signal and incentivize, in fact signal producers that they should actually pull out some of the supply from the market. And in fact, that would disincentivize them to supply more, and that is why quantity supply would go down while quantity demand would go up, and that would result in an equilibrium or restoring market stability. And this is not something new, guys. You already saw this in our previous videos about demand supply, that how when supply goes up, it results in a surplus, and how prices then go down in the market and they readjust back to a new equilibrium. And we saw that that quantity demanded extends when price goes down, and quantity supplied contracts, and again markets restore equilibrium, right? We saw that. So And that is the beauty of the price mechanism, that markets self adjust. They self adjust to surpluses, they self adjust to shortages. And surpluses or shortages is a misallocation of resource. When you have a surplus, it's a resource misallocation. But then the government really doesn't need to do anything about the surplus. The markets self adjust on their own through the price mechanism. The prices guides consumers and producers on what to do. If you have a surplus, prices start going down. Write this down. If you have a surplus, prices start going down. It signals producers and consumers on what to do. It signals consumers and incentivizes them that they should buy more. It signals producers that they should produce less and pull off and reduce quantity supplied. And markets self-heal. While if demand goes up in the market, you have a shortage. And if you have a shortage, then what happens? If you have a shortage, so what happens if you have a shortage? If demand goes up and you have a shortage, then what will happen? Let's say the product becomes popular or whatever. So you have a shortage now. So prices would go up. Prices would start rising in the market all the way up till the equilibrium is restored here. And when prices go up, quantity supplied starts to extend itself, while quantity demanded starts contracting. And the fact that quantity supplied is, so the quantity supplied extending is who's producing this quantity? The producers. But what is guiding producers? This is resource allocation. Producers are investing, they're allocating more of these resources to this particular good. Let's say this is good A, so more of the producers are producing good A now. The new producers have entered the market to produce good A because the higher prices is attracting them to enter this market, and the existing producers are investing more and producing more of this good. It's also signaling consumers to cut back on quantity. Like, maybe those consumers who can't really afford this higher price would automatically be moved, or they would automatically be driven out of the market. I mean, they wouldn't really demand any more of this good. In economic terms, this is known as rationing. Rationing means that consumers, I mean, when prices are going up, I mean, you don't really need to know this term, just telling you, this is more of an A level term, but let's just telling you that when prices are going up, automatically those consumers who can't really afford, they're automatically driven out. They won't really buy your good anymore. So the prices are actually guiding consumers on what to do and the producers on what to do and where to allocate resources, to allocate more of resources to this good or less to this good. Also telling consumers that this good is out of your budget, you better stay out of this. So that is why we're saying that market economy is self-adjusting, and this mechanism is very efficient. It works perfectly fine, and there's no need for the government to step in and do something about the shortage, because shortages would automatically self-adjust as well. It's not that the government needs to do something and worry about the shortage. I mean, prices would automatically guide producers and consumers, right? So that's what we are saying. And guys, to wrap up, I mean, before we wrap up, by the way, I just wanted to let you know what the private sector and the public sector is. I mean, but I think by now you know that what the private and the public sector is, but I just wanted to be part of this video, that the private sector of an economy consists of all those businesses and all those organizations that are actually owned and run by private individuals or companies and not by the government. And their aim is, to maximize profits, while the public sector would consist of all those organizations and businesses that are run by the government and the state. And their main aim is to provide essential goods and services for the public and the society. And their aim is not to make or maximize profits. I mean, their aim is to make profits, because without profits, it's difficult for them to run business, even if it is run by the government, but not really maximize profits. I mean, make minimal profits, or profits such that they don't really have to make losses, or that just covers their basic expenses. I mean, make that much profit only, or even if not any profit, then at least mainly cover their expenses. Otherwise, they would have to finance those losses through tax money, which will again fall on the public. So examples include like public hospitals being run by the state, public schools, police services, defense services, government transport. All of these are basically run by the public sector of an economy. So guys, to wrap up, what we're studying is about now that what economic systems are. We studied what is an economic system, how that answers what, how, for whom to produce. We also studied that different economic systems answer these questions differently. And we also studied that a market economy relies on price and demand and supply and the price mechanism. We also studied that government exists but plays a very limited role. Oh, and just by the way, I told you guys that the government is still present but focuses only on protecting property rights, enforcing contracts, and maintaining law and order. And what I meant was, because usually when this topic is taught to students, usually they are taught that there is no government. Well, that's wrong. There is the government, but their role is very limited. And what is their role? Number one, the role, see, in a market economy, the government does not, you have to understand this. In a market economy, the government does not decides what to produce at what price to sell the good. Instead, its main role is to make sure, again, I'm repeating this. What is the role of the government? To make sure that the market itself can function smoothly. That is the role of the government without distorting the efficiency of these markets. So, firstly, the government, what the government does is in a market economic system, the government protects property rights. And what that means is it makes sure that people feel secure owning the land, the shops, the factories, and businesses. Because if they're not feeling secure in the country to own these shops and factories, how would they do businesses? And if they know that property could be snatched away from them, so if people know their property cannot be taken away illegally, they're more willing to invest in your country and this and the markets and produce goods and services, right? That's what I'm saying. Second, the government job is to enforce contracts, such as if, let's say, two parties, me and you, make an agreement that you are producing something, I'm going to sell you raw material. Now that's a contract. But what if I just, if what if I'm a scammer, or I ditch you out, or I don't follow what I was, what I had accepted the offer or made a contract on it. But what if I don't really follow the contract because I know that the system has loopholes? But then if we have a very good law and order system, then you guys can take me to the court. So what I'm saying is that the government enforces contracts. That means that if two parties agree on a deal, such as, let's say, I say that I'm going to pay you $10,000 a month, but I'm only paying you 4,000, but you can take me to the court. So the government would make sure that you get 10,000 because I had agreed to pay you 10,000. So that's again the government's job. But the government will not intervene in how I'm running my business and what we are doing and how we are running that business and what prices we are offering or what goods we are producing. So any deal, like, what the worker's salary is, or let's say the firm is supplying goods, so the government would come up with laws, the law and order situation, the law that enforces these contracts, the law that makes sure both sides follow the agreement, you as well, me as well. And this, why is that important, by the way? Why is that even goddamn important? It is important because that builds trust in the market. Why would producers produce more? In order for the producers to produce more, they need raw material suppliers. If they know that they can't sue the raw material suppliers for not delivering the raw material on time, then why would the producers invest millions and billions and start a business in this economy, right? So this is important for building trust in the market. Finally, guys, the government must maintain law and order, because by controlling crime and ensuring safety, the government creates a very stable economic environment where businesses can operate and thrive, and, guys, consumers can buy and sell goods without the fear. Otherwise, if you're scared that you'll be killed or being shot or your cell phone will be snatched away, you won't really go in the market. So overall, the government's role is the government's role in a market economic system is not to control the market. It is not to control the market, but to provide a supporting role by providing a legal and secure framework for the markets to function independently. That's all for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this and looked at this topic at a very good and at a very practical angle. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.